understand ourselves, to know our true identity, to see ourselves in the eyes of God, to see ourselves from the inside out. And so what we oftentimes do is see ourselves from the outside in, to see ourselves from the eyes of others, to know ourselves based on how others respond to us. And oftentimes we'll build our identity, in our teen years. This might even be developmentally appropriate, but I think we're called to more. We build our identity based on what we accept and reject, and oftentimes based on who we accept and exclude from our circle. The apostles were still at this phase, right? As they had come to grips with each other, with all of the diversity and struggle and difference that putting a fisherman and a tax collector in the same group might bring about. But they'd come to understand, oftentimes incorrectly, who they were based on this inclusion of their group and who they would want to exclude, right? Who they wanted to rain down fire and brimstone on, who they wanted to stop from preaching the good news, who they thought weren't worthy of Jesus's time and energy. And they were developing their identity in their group. I think when we do this, we run the risk of leaving much good outside of our own world, and we run the risk of never doing the hard work, the prayer, the reflection, of coming to know ourselves. But when we've come to a place where we know ourselves, where we don't necessarily need the affirmation of the person next to me so that I can be comfortable, sure who I am, it shifts how we think of insiders and outsiders, how we think of inclusion and exclusion, what we're willing to allow around our lives without necessarily making it the core of who we are. And this is a lesson that Jesus offers his apostles, who needed to be more willing to recognize the good around them outside of their group, who needed to be able to interact in a more universal way, that would be their calling as they led the early church. And Peter would have to confront this along the way of his ministry. We read about it in the Acts of the Apostles. And the church would call them to this. But in your life and my life, have we come to the place, I won't even say where we can let down our guard and open our lives to others, but have we come to the place where we know ourselves, where we know who we are, where we recognize our core identity, where we can see ourselves at least somewhat through the eyes of God? And then from that place, can we love others? From that place, can we recognize what good there is in others? Because in everyone, we will be able to find both good and evil. If we look carefully in ourselves, we find both good and evil. And as we interact with others, rather than to exclude the people around us, maybe we can just exclude the evil. And in that, not only be enriched by a broader community of people, but also allow the mission to be blessed and strengthened by the good that we find around us. That the apostles, for the sake of their own identity, their own insecurity, they were willing to let demons stay inside of people because they didn't know the people who were throwing out the demons. And Jesus says, no, if they do good, let them do good. And maybe even recognize the connection that we have with them. Again, maybe they won't be our best friends, but we're invited to recognize with eyes of love our brothers and sisters. And I think our world needs, our church needs, for us to know ourselves well enough that we don't have to reject others, exclude others, make fun of others in order to be comfortable, to know